and welcome to part 2 of the video, where we're going to look at fat loss in a lot more detail. Now, in part 1 of the video, we mainly discussed about calories in versus calories out, and we talked about fat loss myths and different methods and tools used to aid fat loss. Now, in this video, we're going to dig a bit deeper and talk about energy and energy expenditure and what can affect it. So, to begin with, I want you to focus over here. This chart here represents our total amount of calories we burn each day. We call this our total daily energy expenditure, also known as TDEE for short. Now, our total daily energy expenditure is governed by 4 components. So before discussing the 4 components that make up our total daily energy expenditure, I just want to highlight that it's broken into 2 parts. We firstly have our resting energy expenditure, short for REE, which makes up for 70% of the calories we expend each day. And secondly, we have our non-resting energy expenditure, NREE, which makes up for 30% of the calories we burn each day. So let's break this down in more detail. So firstly, we have a BMR, which stands for basal metabolic rate. Now this accounts for 70% of the calories we burn each day. So what is our BMR? Our BMR, or basal metabolic rate, simply means the amount of calories we burn at rest. So the best way to imagine this is you to lie in bed all day and do nothing but breathe. The amount of calories you would expend or burn would be 70%, and that'd be through your BMR. And that may seem pretty alarming or surprising to a lot of you, that 70% of the calories you burn each day comes from that. But you've got to remember, for your body to carry out its complex functions such as breathing, your organs carry out their functions, keep you alive, and your digestive system and stuff, that all is quite an energy demanding task. Therefore, when you understand that, it becomes a bit more understandable why 70% of our calories goes towards them tasks. So, moving on. And before I do move on, it's just worth noting that our BMR isn't too adaptable, meaning we don't have too much control over changing it. However, it can go up and down, and I'll explain that in more detail in a minute. Moving on, we have NEAT. That stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Now again, it's just a really fancy term, but all it means is any calories you burn through non-intentional exercise. For example, me talking to the camera, moving my hands around, things such as fidgeting and blinking, and your daily step count throughout the day, all contribute towards or all fall into the NEAT component. That makes up between 15 and 20% of the calories you burn each day. So we'll go into this in more detail later on in the video. So moving on, we have TEF. That stands for thermic effect of food. Now all this means is when you consume food, you consume calories. For them calories to be broken down, that process requires energy. Now foods high in such protein and fibre are a lot harder to break down. Therefore, you use more energy in the process of breaking them down. So it's a good idea to consume a diet high in protein and fibre, because you basically burn more calories in doing so versus when eating foods high in carbs and fat. And this doesn't mean you can eat as much protein and fibre as you want and you won't gain any fat. That isn't true, because obviously if you consume over your calories in protein and fibre, you still will gain weight. However, it just means by eating a diet high in protein and fibre, you will burn more calories overall. So next, and remember, TEF's only about 10% of the calories we burn each day, so it's not a massive factor in our overall daily caloric expenditure. Therefore, don't just go thinking I'm going to eat as much protein as possible and don't have to exercise. That isn't the case, okay? So moving on, lastly, we have EAT. That stands for exercise activity thermogenesis. Again, another fancy term, but all it means is any calories you burn through intentional exercise. For example, you go to the gym, you go for a run, you go for a bike ride, whatever you do, that's intentional activity, or purposeful activity, falls under the EAT component. And that only in the average person accounts for about 5% of the calories they burn each day. Now, obviously, arguably, you could say an athlete's going to have a lot higher EAT component. This is true, but we are talking about the average person here. So the average person normally burns between 5 to 10% of calories each day through intentional exercise. And when I first heard that was surprising, because I thought my gym sessions would be burning a lot more calories. But as you can see here, it's your BMR and NEAT that burn the most calories throughout the day. So which brings me on to my next point. I want to talk about energy balance, okay? So, as I previously mentioned, a calorie is just a unit of energy. So when we're talking about calories, we're talking about energy, okay? So I want you to focus on this seesaw or scale, however you interpret it as, and pay attention to what's on there, okay? So when the seesaw or scale is balanced, we're maintaining our body weight. We call this energy homeostasis. So our body likes to be in this state. It means that we're in balance, basically, okay? So when our calories in or energy in is the same as our calories out or energy out, it means we're maintaining weight, okay? Just like on part 1 of the video, as I showed you on the scale, this is the same principle, but we're just looking at it from a different angle, okay? So if you remember on the previous video, my maintenance calories was 3,000. I've got 3,000 calories coming in and I burn 3,000 calories each day. It balances it out. Therefore, I'm maintaining my weight. I'm in energy homeostasis. Now, obviously, we want to lose weight. So let's talk about fat loss. So for fat loss to occur, we need to be in what's called negative energy balance, or for short, NEB. Now, this happens due to being in a calorie deficit. Now, what happens when you're in a calorie deficit? You eat less food, you reduce your calories basically, and you increase your energy expenditure, so you exercise more, okay? So by doing that, you reduce your calories in. So when you reduce your calories in, this pushes down and begins to tip the scale. Now also, as your energy out increases, so you increase your activity level, this pushes the scale up. So the act of reducing your calories and increasing your activity level will tip the scale like this, okay? Creating negative energy balance. Therefore, you're in a calorie deficit and you're going to lose weight, okay? This is great. However, when being in a calorie deficit, we also face some other challenges. Now, that is that we have certain hormones which basically make it difficult to be in a diet. Now, this is completely natural response of being in a calorie deficit or dieting, but it just makes it a little bit harder to be in a diet. Now, the reason these hormones get released is because, like I said, your body likes being in homeostasis. It likes being in balance. So when your body becomes out of balance, your body will basically try and deploy mechanisms to try and restore you back to homeostasis. Now, one way of doing this is releasing hormones. Now, there's a few hormones your body releases, but the two I'm going to talk about in this video, to keep things simple, are leptin and ghrelin, okay? So firstly, let's discuss leptin. Leptin makes you feel full up. It makes you feel satiated. So when you eat a meal, you get that full feeling. That's because your leptin levels have gone up, okay? However, when you're dieting, your leptin levels decline. They go down. So when this happens, it makes you feel more hungry. So you generally just feel more hungry, your appetite increases, okay? Because the leptin's gone down. Now, secondly, in contrast to this, we have ghrelin, which goes up. Now, ghrelin, like I said, is a hunger hormone and it's responsible for increasing your appetite. So when ghrelin levels go up, you feel more hungry. So it goes without saying, with leptin levels decreasing and ghrelin levels increasing, it's a recipe for making you feel hungry, which makes it quite difficult when you're trying to diet. So in addition to our hormones working against us, our body also has a second line of defense. And this means our 4 components that make up our total daily energy expenditure begin to decline. So these 4 components that are part of our total daily energy expenditure all begin to decline. Now, you may have heard of a term called metabolic damage. Now, I just want to say that the word damage isn't suitable for the term. Your metabolism doesn't technically get damaged. Now, when you refer to something being damaged, you're referring to it not working or being broken. Strictly speaking, that isn't really true. Your metabolism doesn't become damaged, but instead can adapt. So I like to use the more common known term as metabolic adaptation or adaptive thermogenesis, as they basically mean the same thing. So what does metabolic adaptation mean? Metabolic adaptation is referring to when your energy expenditure decreases greater than what you would predict when using a weight loss formula, okay? So going back to the 4 components that make up our total energy expenditure, they all begin to decline, okay? Now let's go into the reasons why this happens. So our exercise activity thermogenesis, short for EAT, or intentional exercise, that begins to decline while we're in a calorie deficit due to our body becoming a bit more efficient at carrying out them exercise routines. So if you're following the same exercise routine, your body becomes a bit more efficient at carrying out that routine, therefore you burn less calories. Also, another reason would be because when you lose weight, you're now a lighter version of yourself, therefore you don't require as much energy to move around or require as many calories to move around. So your E component drops. Also, thermic effect of food, that drops too, likely due to eating less food. So obviously if you're in a calorie deficit, you're restricting your calories, you're not eating as much, so your thermic effect of food will also decline. Next, NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or also known as non-intentional exercise, that also declines whilst being in the calorie deficit, and this is due to basically your body becoming a bit more frugal with your calories. So if I'm eating a calorie surplus and I've got a lot of additional calories, I'll tend to move around a lot more and burn more calories. The opposite is true whilst in a calorie deficit. So whilst restricting calories, your body becomes a bit more frugal and doesn't want you burning as much calories. So you just subconsciously move around less. Now in the process of doing that, obviously your NEAT component will decline, okay? Next, your BMR, basal metabolic rate, will also decline. And this is likely due to just being a lighter version of yourself. Like I said previously, you just won't require as much calories whilst moving around. And it's the same process as what I was saying about the NEAT. The more calories you eat, the more calories you can technically expend. Your body becomes more active as you consume more calories. However, take them calories away, place yourself in a calorie deficit, the body then doesn't have as many calories to basically waste. Therefore, you will just move around less and burn less calories. Now, the problem is when all these four components that make up our energy expenditure or our energy out, when they all decline, this will then push down here and cause us to go back to energy balance. Now, this is known as hitting a plateau. So when these components push the scale back down and it goes to balance or homeostasis, this means we've hit a plateau. It means we're no longer losing weight anymore. Obviously, this isn't good if you want to continue to lose weight. If you haven't reached your ideal weight goal yet, you want to know how to break a plateau. So how do we break a plateau? So we have two options. You could obviously reduce your energy in or reduce your calories even further to begin to tip the scale back into negative energy balance. However, I would try and avoid this. The reason being on a diet is difficult as it is. So by reducing your calories any further, you're not going to have a sufficient amount of calories to allow your body to recover from your training sessions. Also, the less calories you are on, the harder it is to get a higher protein intake. And thirdly, it also means that your training sessions just aren't going to be as fueled. You're just generally not going to have as much energy to carry out the sessions effectively. So I try to avoid reducing my calories any further when hit a plateau, although sometimes you may have to reduce them slightly. But the main protocol when hitting a plateau is to look at increasing the variables or components that we have the most control over. Now this will be our NEAT. So we want to increase our NEAT when we've hit a plateau. Now how do we do that? Well, if you remember, I said our step count is governed pretty heavily under our NEAT component. So aiming to increase our daily or weekly step count will therefore increase the NEAT component. Now remember, NEAT accounts between 15 to 20% of the calories we burn each day. So by increasing this NEAT component, we can then begin to tip this scale back up into negative energy balance. Now, in conjunction with this, we can also increase our protein and fiber intake, which will then increase our thermic effect of food. Although a very small percentage of our calories that are going out, it will also help in order to tip this scale back up into negative energy balance. Now lastly, the third thing that we can do to create negative energy balance is increase our activity level further. So by increasing our training sessions, by making them maybe more intense or longer in duration, or increasing the frequency that we're training or doing cardio, will basically increase our E component or exercise activity thermogenesis, therefore creating the scale to be pushed back up into negative energy balance, okay? So the key takeaway here is when you've hit a plateau, you need to increase your need component, you can increase your protein and fibre, which will increase your thermic effect of food, and you need to increase your activity level, which will increase your eat component. By increasing all three of these components, you will tip the scale from being in homeostasis into negative energy balance, which is create a calorie deficit, which will enable you to continue to lose weight, okay? The second part of the video might have been a bit confusing. There's a lot going on here, so please don't hesitate to message me if you feel like I haven't explained something properly, or you just want to get a better understanding of what's going on here. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you've got any other questions or any other video suggestions, please don't hesitate to message me. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Have a good day.